In today's class, we are going to be talking about the neurons and the neuroglia. In our last class, we already started with the neurons. We talked about the parts of the neurons, and we also looked at diagrams, pictures of the neuron. So for today's class, yes, we were talking about the neurons also, then also about the neuroglia cells. The cellular component that makes up the nervous system is majorly divided into two categories. We have the neurons that are responsible for transfer of impulses and signals from the receptors down to the central nervous system, the interpretation, and also the relay of this interpreted information back to the effectors. That is the function of the neurons. Then we also have the neuroglial cells. The neuroglial cells are much more than the neurons, and their role is to protect the neurons, they nourish the neurons and perform other functions apart from transfer of impulse. They don't transfer impulse. What they do is that they support the neurons in what they do. You get it? So neurons and neuroglia, they are the basic component of the nervous system. Now, what is a neuron? A neuron is the basic structural and functional unit of the nervous system responsible for receiving, processing, and transmitting information through electrical and chemical signals. So the basic structural and functional unit of nervous system is the neuron, just like I mentioned in the last class. And what are the structures of a neuron? A typical neuron has three main parts. Yes, the cell body, also called the soma or the pericardium, and in the cell body we have the nucleus, we have the granules, we have nuclear bodies, and this part is responsible for metabolic activities of the neuron. The cell of the neuron, the cell body, it contains nuclear body, I mentioned it, and these nuclear bodies are made up of rough endoplasmic reticulum that are responsible for protein synthesis. So the cell body of a neuron, it contains the nucleus and some other organelles. It's responsible for metabolic activities of the neuron and also contains nuclear bodies that are made up of rough endoplasmic reticulum responsible for protein synthesis. Then we also have dendrites. I also mentioned dendrite. Dendrites, they are like short and very branched processes. They're found on the cell body. If you look at the cell body, a picture of a neuron, at the cell body part, you find these dendrites branching out from the body, the cell body. They are short and highly branched processes. They receive signals from other neurons and they conduct impulses toward the cell body. They are found on the body, on sides of the cell body. So when they receive these signals from other neurons, they conduct these impulses toward the cell body. So know that dendrite, they're short, highly branched processes that receive signals from other neurons and conduct impulses toward the cell body. Then we have the axon. Axon. The axon is a long single process that extends from the cell body. That long process that is coming from the cell body that extends down, that is the axon. It's a long single process that carries impulses away from the cell body. And this axon begins at the axon hillock. Begins at where? The axon hillock. And the axon can be covered by myelin sheath for faster impulse transmission. This myelin sheath, they are like wrappings on the body of the axon. And the main essence of this myelin sheath is to facilitate faster transfer of impulse. Because this helps the impulses to jump between sheaths. It makes transfer of impulses faster. And we all know that the nervous system requires a very fast transfer of information. So the presence of this myelin sheath helps to make the transfer of impulses faster. Then there are other important axonal features I also mentioned. I mentioned the node of Ranvier. I mentioned axon terminals. The node of Ranvier, there are gaps in myelin sheath. There are gaps found in myelin sheath. Between adjacent myelin sheaths, the gaps found in between them, those are the nodes of Ranvier. Then we also have the axon terminals. The axon terminals, also called the synaptic knobs, they are responsible for releasing neurotransmitters that are present in synaptic connections. If you remember, I mentioned that the axon terminals connect with the dendrite of another neuron, and the space found between these two different components or different parts is called synapse. And these synapses, they perform their function through the use of what? Neurotransmitters. The neurotransmitters help to transmit the information coming from one neuron to adjacent and other neurons. So these axon terminals are the ones responsible for producing and releasing these neurotransmitters. Now, types of neurons. Based on structures, the types of neurons that we have the multipolar neurons. When you hear multipolar, it means these neurons, they have one axon and many dendrites, and it's the most common type. This is the most common type of neuron. They only have one axon, but multiple and many dendrites. They are mostly found in motor neurons and interneurons. The pictures, the images are not here. I will look for a way to get the images across to you people, to you guys. But let's just talk about it for now. Then we have the bipolar neurons. These bipolar neurons, they have one axon and one dendrite. One axon and one dendrite. But the multipolar neurons, they have one axon and many dendrites. So note the difference between the two. While bipolar neurons, they have one axon and one dendrite, and they are mostly found in sensory organs like the retina. But the retina is found in the eye. Yes, it is mostly found in sensory organs like the retina. It only has an axon, one axon, and one dendrite. Now, pseudo-unipolar neurons. Pseudo-unipolar neurons, they are single processes that divide into two branches. Single processes that divide into what? Two branches. They have one axon, but that axon splits, it divides into two. You have one to the left and one to the right. That is the pseudo unipolar neuron. A single process, but it divides into two branches. And this type of neuron is found in sensory ganglia. This type of neuron is found in sensory ganglia. They are found in sensory ganglia. So, based on structural classification of neurons, we have three types. We have the multipolar neurons. They have one axon and many dendrites. We have the unipolar, the bipolar neurons. They have one axon and one dendrite. Then we have the pseudo unipolar neurons, a single process that divides into two branches. A single process that divides, a single axon process that divides into two branches, and they are found in sensory ganglia. Now, functional classification, you can also classify neurons based on their function. I already mentioned this before. Based on their function, they are majorly the sensory neurons, the motor neurons, and the interneurons. The sensory neurons are also called afferents. If you remember, I said it. Affer, we want it. Sensory, we want it. Afferent neurons. Motor neurons, efferent neurons, and the interneurons, also called intermediate neurons, or you can call them associate neurons, Now let's look at each of them. Okay, now sensory neurons. These neurons, their function is that they carry impulses from the receptors to the central nervous system. They carry impulses from the receptors to the central nervous system. They're the one that receive the impulse from the receptor. If you remember, the receptors are those ones that are found in the external part or the periphery of the human body, and their major function is to receive the stimuli from the external environment or from the internal environment. Now, the sensory neurons now take over. They carry these impulses received from the receptors to the central nervous system. I'm sure you still remember the types of receptors we have: the mechanoreceptors, the heat receptors, the pain receptors, the What other receptors again? You have the chemoreceptors, the baroreceptors. I hope you still remember. Now the second one is the motor neurons, or the efferent neurons. Now these neurons, they carry impulses from the central nervous system to the muscles or glands. They carry impulses from the central nervous system to the muscles or glands. Note the differences. Sensory carries impulses from receptors to the central nervous system. Motor neurons carry impulses from central nervous system to the muscles or the glands. Now the interneurons, also called the association neurons. These neurons are found within the central nervous system, fine, but what they do is that they connect the sensory and the motor neuron. They are like an intermediary, the middleman between the sensory neurons and the motor neurons. So they help to connect the motor neurons and the sensory neurons. They are found within the central nervous system. Now, these three classification of neurons based on function, they have where they can be found. Your assignment is for you now to go and look for where each of these neurons can be found. Where can we find the sensory neurons? Where can the motor neurons be found? And also, where can the interneurons be found? You get it? So I will see you in the next video where I'll be talking about the neuroglial cells.